hugging the terrain just 300 feet above ground level to stay below Russian radar. They're heading northeast toward Belgorod Oblast, deep inside Russian airspace. Their mission: destroy a critical Russian Su-34 maintenance and rearmament center located on the outskirts of Velyky, just 18 miles from the Ukrainian border. Satellite reconnaissance and SIGINT intercepts had pinpointed the facility as a major refit hub, one responsible for turning returning Su-34 bombers into strike-ready platforms within 48 hours. The center had been operating quietly for weeks, hidden under reinforced hangars and camouflage netting. But a recent surge in bombing runs against Kharkiv raised alarm bells, and Ukrainian analysts traced the sortie pattern back to this very base. The operation, codenamed Iron Reversal, had been in planning for 12 days. Ukrainian engineers reconfigured the flankers for terrain, hugging flight and precision toss bomb delivery. No drones, no decoys. Just 2 Cold War jets and 2 smart bombs, backed by speed, surprise, and a deep understanding of Russian air defense blind spots. At this hour, Russian crews were least alert. The AWACS patrol wouldn't pass overhead for another 40 minutes. Ukrainian pilots had less than 6 minutes to get in, drop their payloads, and vanish into the tree line before enemy SAMs could lock on. The stakes were massive. If successful, the strike would cripple Russia's forward bombing capacity for weeks and send a very loud message through a very quiet sky. The Ukrainian pilots weren't just flying into enemy territory. They were flying into one of the most heavily defended air zones in western Russia. The target near Velyky sat within the engagement envelope of an S-400 Triumph battery, positioned just 11 miles north of the base. Anchored by the 91 N6E Big Bird radar, the system could track up to 300 targets at ranges exceeding 250 miles, with missiles capable of striking aircraft up to 120 miles out. In theory, nothing short of a stealth jet should have made it past. But the S-400 wasn't alone. Protecting the inner perimeter were 2 Pantsir S-1 short-range air defense units, stationed on elevated platforms near the airfield's eastern and southern flanks. Armed with 12 surface-to-air missiles and dual 30mm cannons, the Pantsers were designed to intercept both low-flying aircraft and incoming munitions. Combined with thermal optics and radar tracking, they created a dense kill zone stretching from 0.6 to 12 miles around the base. Above it all, orbiting at 26,000 feet, was a Russian Beriev A-50 AWACS aircraft, Russia's flying radar dome. Its massive rotodome scanned a 360-degree radius, feeding real-time data to both ground crews and missile batteries. Though it wasn't directly overhead at the time of the strike, it was scheduled to sweep the sector by 5:20 a.m., giving Ukrainian planners a tight but usable window. In total, the Russian air defense grid formed a multi-layered wall of steel, radar, and precision munitions, calibrated to detect and destroy everything from cruise missiles to fighter jets. On paper, it was airtight. But Ukraine wasn't sending paper, they were sending pilots who knew exactly where the holes were. And they were flying straight through them. Punching through Russia's layered air defenses wasn't going to be about brute force. It would come down to altitude, timing, and electronic deception. At just 100 feet above ground level, the 2 Ukrainian Su-27 darted through valleys and tree lines, hugging the terrain with terrain-following radar switched off. Every hill and forested ridge was a shield each second at low altitude, bought them distance without detection. Lead jet callsign Viper 1 was outfitted with an SPS-141 ECM pod strapped under the fuselage. Designed for Soviet-era jamming but recently reprogrammed, the pod emitted broad-spectrum electronic noise, targeting the radar frequencies used by the S-400's 91 N6E array. Its mission wasn't to blind the system, just to confuse it long enough to delay lock-on. Think digital fog thrown into the eyes of a giant. Trailing jet callsign Viper 2 was the shooter. Mounted under its wings were 2 UMPK-modified FAB 500 glide bombs, each with GPS, INS guidance, and pop-out wings that could carry them up to 30 miles once released. The munitions didn't just fall, they glided with precision, able to arc around terrain and hit within 13 feet of the intended target. At 4:57 a.m., over a forested ravine 18 miles from Velyky, Viper 1 climbed briefly to 500 feet and activated the ECM pod at full power. Russian radar operators saw ghost signals, erratic altitude changes, phantom echoes, and Doppler flickers that mimicked flocks of birds. Simultaneously, Viper 2 positioned itself for a high-speed toss bomb release, calculating the angle needed to lob the UMPKs onto the maintenance depot without ever flying directly over it. The Russians still thought they were watching the skies. But Ukraine was coming in from the treetops, low, fast, and armed with ghosts. At exactly 5:01 a.m., with the maintenance facility now 26 miles, 42 kilometers ahead, the Ukrainian pilots executed the most dangerous part of the mission, breaching Russia's active kill zone. Viper 1, the lead Su-27, climbed slightly to 600 feet and deployed a modified Kivani-M electronic decoy pod. Instantly, the pod flooded the spectrum with false radar signatures, mimicking multiple high-speed targets at different altitudes. On Russian scopes, it looked like a flight of 6 incoming jets, some flying high, some low, all converging at once. The S-400 battery hesitated. Operators scrambled to verify the targets, but Doppler shift anomalies and intermittent ghost signals forced a delay in firing authorization. By the time they isolated the real threat, it was already inside the engagement envelope. At 12 miles out, one of the Pantsir S-1 units opened fire. 2 surface-to-air missiles arced into the sky, homing on what they believed was Viper 1, but the Ukrainian pilots were ready. They dropped infrared flares and radar-reflective chaff in quick bursts, creating a wall of heat and metallic echo. Both missiles veered off and detonated mid-air harmless. Above them, the A-50 AWACS began to struggle. The Doppler clutter from the terrain-hugging flight, combined with electronic interference from Kibani and SPS-141 pods, caused tracking loss every 7 to 10 seconds. Russian command had a flickering, unstable picture targets, appearing, disappearing, reappearing 800 feet away. That was the window Ukraine needed. At 5:04 a.m., Viper 2 popped up to 1,200 feet, just enough for optimal toss bomb release. As it crested, the AWACS finally got a clean radar lock, but it was too late. The glide bombs were already in the air, wings deployed, guidance activated, diving silently toward their target. Russia's billion-dollar air defense grid had just been defeated by deception, noise, and 2 well-timed ghosts in the sky. The moment had come. With the Russian air defense net momentarily blinded and missiles thrown off course, Viper 2 broke from the tree-hugging flight profile and began a swift climb. In just 17 seconds, the flanker hit 5,000 feet, just high enough to initiate a precision toss-bombing maneuver without crossing directly over the target. At 5:05 a.m., the cockpit AI calculated trajectory in real time, factoring wind speed, altitude, and target coordinates preloaded into the bomb guidance system. With a sharp pull, Viper 2 pitched upward at 40 degrees, then released both UMPK-guided Fab 500 bombs. The twin munitions arced upward, briefly vanishing into the morning haze before angling downward glide wings unfolding silently as they homed in. Their target, the Su-34 Maintenance and Rearmament Depot on the edge of the Valwiki base. The first bomb struck with surgical precision, punching clean through the reinforced hangar roof before detonating with a 500-pound warhead. Inside, 4 Su-34 bombers in varying stages of repair were torn apart by the blast, fuselages ripped open, engines flung like scrap. The second bomb landed just 80 feet away, slamming into the fuel and munition staging area near a row of tanker trucks. The explosion was instant and catastrophic, a rolling fireball over 300 feet high, vaporizing the vehicles and engulfing the depot in thick black smoke. By 5:06 a.m., flames were visible for miles. Secondary explosions rocked the facility as stored missiles and jet fuel ignited in rapid succession. Russian personnel scrambled for cover, too late to stop what had already been set in motion. Above it all, Viper 2 leveled out, turned west, and dropped altitude back under the radar horizon. The message had been delivered not with words, but with steel, fire, and a pair of Cold War ghosts reborn for a new kind of war. The explosions were not just destructive, they were transformative. By 5:07 a.m., satellite imagery and forward ISR drones confirmed the scale of the devastation. The first UMPK bomb had ripped through the hangar's corrugated roof and exploded just above the maintenance bay floor, where 4 Su-34 fullback bombers sat exposed, stripped for rearming and inspection. The blast annihilated all 4 jets, engines shattered, wings collapsed, and fuselage sections folded like crushed soda cans. Nothing was salvageable. The second bomb, even deadlier, had struck the fuel and munitions staging zone just yards away. 3 tanker trucks carrying aviation-grade kerosene and a dozen crates of air-to-ground missiles went up in a firestorm. The resulting detonation triggered a towering column of flame over 330 feet tall, hot enough to melt nearby scaffolding and warp metal fencing. 2 Russian technicians working a night shift were killed instantly in the hangar. 11 others, mostly fuel handlers and ordnance crews, suffered burns, fractures, and shrapnel wounds as they scrambled from the fireball. Emergency sirens blared, but visibility dropped to near zero as thick black smoke stretched over 2 miles downwind, cloaking the base in chaos. Even more critically, the blast shockwave damaged the S-400's 91 N6E Big Bird radar array, which had been positioned less than 400 yards from the depot. Engineers later confirmed that a high-voltage surge and acoustic overpressure had disrupted internal calibration and fried the cooling circuits. The entire battery went offline for over 36 hours, completely blind. By 5:10 a.m., the Veluki base had gone from fully operational to crippled and smoldering. What was supposed to be a hardened forward support site had become a smoking crater, and 2 aging Su-27 second, equipped with little more than electronic decoys and upgraded glide bombs, had just taken out a strategic node in Russia's air war machine. It was a precision kill, and the ripple effects were just beginning. As the smoke drifted across Belgorod airspace and Russian crews scrambled to assess the wreckage, one thing became clear: this wasn't a drone strike. There had been no loitering munitions, no remote piloting, and no expendable assets. Ukraine had sent pilots into one of the most heavily defended air corridors in Europe, and they'd come back alive. For months, Russia had hardened its air defense doctrine around repelling UAV swarms and cruise missiles. That doctrine was now outdated. This operation shattered expectations, revealing that Ukraine was quietly reviving a hit-and-run airstrike strategy using legacy fighter jets rebuilt, rearmed, and reprogrammed for modern warfare. The Su-27 second used in the raid were relics of the Cold War, fast, durable, and outdated by today's stealth standards. But under Ukrainian hands, they were reborn. Outfitted with digitally reconfigured ECM pods, retrofitted terrain-following radars, and low-cost UMPK glide kits, these old hunters were now capable of precision strike missions once thought to be the realm of stealth bombers. And they didn't cost millions per unit. That's what made the attack so unsettling for Russian planners. It wasn't just the loss of aircraft or infrastructure, it was the signal. Ukraine had found a new formula: minimal footprint, maximum effect. A manned jet, flying under radar, dropping guided munitions from beyond enemy reach, then vanishing before SAMs could react. It wasn't about tech superiority, it was about tactical surprise and strategic timing. The message was clear: if Ukraine could do this with 4 zero-year-old flankers, what could they pull off next? And just how many more of those old ghosts were waiting in the wings? If even a pair of Su-27 second jets built when the Berlin Wall was still standing can punch through Russia's most advanced air defenses, what does that say about the concept of invincibility? The strike on Veluki wasn't just a tactical win, it was a strategic embarrassment. A billion-dollar defense grid backed by S-400 second, Panzers, and AWACS support had failed to stop 2 aging fighters flying low and armed with budget-friendly smart bombs. For Moscow, the implications are chilling. If hardened bases like Veluki aren't safe, what base is? If 4 frontline bombers can be wiped out in under 3 minutes, how many more are vulnerable? Russia now faces a question it never expected to ask. Is any installation still safe from Ukraine's resurgent air force? Because this wasn't just a strike, it was a message. And it didn't come from some high-tech drone swarm or next-gen stealth fighter. It came from 2 pilots in Cold War machines that had been quietly reimagined for 21st century warfare. By the time Russian commanders understood what had hit them, it was already over. The smoke still rising from Veluki told the story